Thank you. Good morning.
Morning.
Good ciao. Bonjour. Buongiorno. Any others I missed? What is it? Good. All right. So yes, I'm Russ, and what we're going to be doing is looking at content types. Now, this session normally takes me an hour at a squeeze. So let's see how we get on. We'll see within the 50 minutes. If you just don't ask any questions, that'd be great. No, joke. So, you're of course more than welcome to ask questions. That is why you're here, to learn stuff. So you're certainly more than welcome to ask away. So before we go too much further, seeing as though I have travelled all the way from Melbourne, I may as well just at least do not a sales pitch as such, but at least just tell you who we are. So. 3Grow, based, our head office is in Australia. However, we do offer public and private training all over Asia Pacific. We do public scheduled courses in Hong Kong, Singapore, KL, as well as around Australia and New Zealand as well. But we do offer private courses anywhere at all in Asia Pacific. We also have partners based in Europe and the US as well. So we can do global training pretty easily. So we run training in all aspects of SharePoint, InfoPath, not so much these days due to the fact it is being deprecated, but also, as I mentioned before, the NIFTIT suite of products, Office 365, Project Server, etc. So we do completely customized, tailored training for organizations, so we can go in and see what they're using, what they're not using, and tailor a training package specifically for their users on exactly what they need to know. As far as me, I have only just recently become managing director of 3Grow. I was running it for some people based in New Zealand. I then just bought it from them, so that's just happened. So if I have got some business cards, so later if you do happen to take one of my business cards, it does have my old job title on there, because I'm not going to throw them away, that's just a waste of paper / card. So I'm getting rid of those ones first. But so I am now the managing director. I have been a trainer for over 13 years. I know what you're thinking, I don't look old enough to have been in full-time work for that long. I started when I was 14. It's a lie. I did start training quite young. I was 21 when I started as a trainer. But that seems like a lifetime ago. Well, it is a lifetime if you're 13, isn't it? So my contact details are up there. I've been specialising in SharePoint for the last kind of 9 years or so. Before that, I taught anything that was going. Mainly IT, but also kind of soft skills stuff as well. Like project management, I used to teach Prince 2 and sales training and all that kind of stuff. All right, so what we're going to be talking about during this session is, first of all, we're going to talk about what content types are, why we should use them, how to therefore create and manage those content types, using them within our lists and libraries. We're also going to have a little chat about the content type hub. For those of you who don't know what that is, you will find out soon. We'll do a little demo on creating and using content types. And then we'll go through any questions and answers at the end. But if you have any questions as we go through, you are more than welcome to shout out. It's not a problem whatsoever. If it's relevant to what we're talking about there and then of course, that is the best time to ask the question. So, not a problem at all. So, before we go too much further, hands up here who is consciously using content types within their SharePoint environment. A few of you. Anybody not really know what content types are? A couple of you? All right. I'm sure someone put their hand up to both of those things, which is quite common. People consciously use them, but have no idea what they are. The most, content types are, in my opinion, the most important aspect of SharePoint. If you're not using content types effectively within your SharePoint environment, you are not making the most of SharePoint. It is as simple as that. You can't be. You can't be using SharePoint efficiently and effectively without using consciously using content types. It's as black and white as that, in my opinion. I mean, you can use it, just not very well. When it comes to categorizing stuff, folders are rubbish. Why? Why are folders terrible at categorizing files, for example?
Can't create views.
Sorry?
Can't create views with them.
Well, you can't create views. So what we mean by that is that it suits one particular scenario. They're completely rigid, and whatever the folder structure represents is essentially the only way you'll be able to see that information. So therefore, we don't have the flexibility with a folder structure to be able to show information in different ways at different times and in different scenarios. How can we do that? Sorry? Metadata. Yeah, metadata, columns, properties, whatever you like to call them, same thing really. That is how we do it. If documents are tagged with metadata properties, then we are able to therefore use that information for sorting, filtering and grouping, so those views that we just mentioned a moment ago. So be able to present the information in different ways. Is that all making sense so far?
Yeah.
Wonderful, that's good. So metadata is great, but quite often people will add metadata directly to a list or a library. There's a couple of potential downsides to that, and we'll get to that in just a moment. So the way that content types work is that everything that sits in any list or library in SharePoint is based on a content type. That's just how SharePoint works. So that's why when I asked anyone if anyone is using content types, of course you're all using content types if you're using SharePoint, so that's why I included the word consciously. You're consciously using content types within your SharePoint deployment. Because you will be by default, because very simply the way that SharePoint works. So what we mean by a content type is it's an item template. So the content type determines all the characteristics and behavior and the structure of the items that are based on them. So that can be anything from, primarily, it's the columns, the metadata, but could also be any workflows, any file templates in the case of document content types. Bear in mind that the demonstration that we're going to be doing is based around document content types. However, list items are of course based on content types too. When we create a list or a library using any of those out-of-the-box list and library templates, they will come preset with their default content type. So the tasks list will come preset with the task content type. The announcements list template will come with the announcement content type. There we go, we're getting it. The contacts list will come with the contact content type, and so on. So the content type determines all the characteristics of the items that will therefore sit in that list. Now, by default, most of your out-of-the-box list and library templates will just come with that one default content type. So what we're going to do later is have a look at how we can allow management of content types so we can have multiple options available. Basically on the new item drop-down of a list or on the new document drop-down of a library, we can have multiple items. So I said file templates, retention policies as well, so that the information management policies, audit settings, that kind of stuff, that can all be set at the content type level as well. Often people will create a workflow for a library, but dependent on what the nature of the document might actually determine what workflow process should happen. So for example, the example we're going to use is a library where we store invoices and quotes that we've raised for our customers. Now the person who's responsible for approving invoices might be different from the person who's responsible for approving quotes. So therefore we can't set a workflow at the library level because the process may well be different dependent on the content type. So why should we use them? So here's a scenario for you. We want to store invoices and quotes within the same library. People will often store these in separate libraries. So a library for invoices, a library for quotes, a library for contracts. So people will maybe have a library for each type of document. When we say type of document, we don't of course mean whether it's Word or Excel, we mean the nature of the document, what the document means. So other people will go to the opposite end of the spectrum and have one library for everything. With a team site in SharePoint, you get a library called Documents. In fact, with the vast majority of site templates, you'll get a library called Documents. The first thing I would ever recommend doing as soon as you create a new site is delete it. Why? What does documents mean? Correct, nothing. It means nothing. What documents are there? If I've got a site for my sales department and I have a library called Documents, is that just every document relating to the entire sales department? Meeting minutes, meeting agendas, invoices, quotes, contracts, proposals, policies, procedures, expense claims, all in the same library? No. Terrible way of doing things. Because you can't have columns for all of those in the same library. Alternatively, we don't want a library for every individual type of document because you'll end up with, what if I want to see all documents relating to a particular customer in one place? Well, I can't, without creating some kind of custom page for that. I'd have to go to 3 separate libraries, one for invoices, one for quotes, one for contracts. So it doesn't allow me the flexibility to show things in different ways quite so easily. So, invoices and quotes have slightly different metadata from each other. For example, for a quote, we need to know who the customer is, who the account manager is, the amount that the quote is for, and the date it was raised. With an invoice, it's very similar, plus the PO number. Quotes will never have a PO number. Invoices must always have a PO number. If I don't know about content types, the only way to store that information is by either adding columns or creating columns at the library level. But if I want them in the same library, PO number, what am I going to do with that column? If I make it mandatory, I must populate it. And I say I mean as an end user, I must populate it for invoices. But I must also populate it for quotes, which is not appropriate. If I make it optional, then we can populate it for invoices and leave it blank for quotes. But we can also populate it for quotes and leave it blank for invoices. So we're not getting good data integrity. It's not good quality information. If you want people to be able to get good quality information out of SharePoint, people need to be putting good quality information into SharePoint in the first place. The way that we control that good quality of information and enforce that good quality of information is what? What's my session about? Content types. There we go. There's the answer. So content types are the way that site owners enforce that good quality of information. So if we were to add those columns directly to the list or the library, as I said, there's potential issues with whether we make it mandatory or optional. Depending on what we need, that's not necessarily appropriate. By using content types, that therefore allows you to have different types of items in the same list or library. That's one of the two sides of content types. Different types of items in the same list or library. The example there being invoices and quotes. Because not just the metadata, as we said, maybe different workflows, different document templates, of course. When I choose to create a new invoice, I want an invoice template. Create a new quote, a quote template. Straightforward as that. So that's one side of content types. The other side of content types is, rather than the ability to have different types of items in the same list or library, we say different, similar. They're not going to be, they wouldn't be in the same library if they were completely different. There will certainly be a relationship between them, common columns and things like that. So we say different, meaning not identical. So quotes and invoices together, meeting minutes and meeting agendas together, policies and procedures together, that kind of thing. Still slightly different though. So that's one side of content types. The other side of content types is the ability to have the same type of item in multiple lists or libraries, but all managed from one place, which is your content types gallery. So therefore, if I update the invoice content type in the gallery, it will update every library in which that content type is used, not only for new items created from that point onwards, but also any existing items. Once something is based on a content type, it will remain based on that content type unless you consciously change it. So once an invoice is created, unless I say so, it's going to remain based on the invoice content type. Meaning if I then add a new column to the invoice content type, it is available to be populated against each existing invoice, plus of course any new invoices created from that point onwards. So another reason that the content types are important is that some features or functionality within SharePoint specifically rely on either having different content types or the knowledge or a knowledge of content types at least. So for example, the content organizer. Anybody here use the content organizer? Few of you, yeah. So for those of you not familiar with it, the idea of the content organizer is you're able to set up a series of rules so that when a user submits a document, it can analyze it against the rules and put it into the right place automatically. We all know that as a general rule, users can be a bit stupid. So this allows us to automate the process of putting things in the right place. Even if a user puts something in the wrong place, the content organizer puts it in the right place. So it's very handy. But every rule that we create is specifically for a content type. So we need to at least know about content types. Document sets, anybody use those? They're like folders on steroids. That's probably the best way to describe it. Super folders. So therefore, document sets. In order to create document sets, we need to know about content types. Because document set is a content type. Therefore, we have to create our own based on it, so we have to have that knowledge there. Document IDs as well. Again, we need to know what will get an ID. What we mean by a document ID is a unique reference that's assigned to every file in the entire site collection. How does SharePoint know what to assign IDs to? Well, anything that's based on any content type from document downwards within the content type gallery hierarchy. So, additional reasons as to why content types are important is those 3 pieces of functionality, amongst others. That's just some examples. All right, so when it comes to creating content types are more often than not managed per site collection. So normally we'd have a site collection for each function of the business, whether that's a team, a department, a division, or something like that. We'd have a site collection for each of those. Each site collection will have the same set of out-of-the-box content types as a starting point. But then, of course, in each of those site collections, we can create additional content types dependent on what we need. So in the sales site collection, we can create content types that are specific to sales, like invoices and quotes and contracts and things like that. In the finance site, maybe there's a payslip content type amongst various others. But then there's other content types that are relevant or required throughout the entire organization. Meeting minutes and meeting agendas, for example. Everyone, every team, every department will have meetings. Some would say too many meetings. But they happen all over the organization. And therefore, those content types need to be available through every single site collection. So for that, we use what's called the content type hub, and I'll come back to that a little bit later. Each site will inherit its content types from its parent. So the content types are initially managed in the top level sites of the site collection in the most part, aside from the hub that we'll talk about later, and then they simply are passed down to all the other sites in the site collection. It is possible to create a content type at any site level. If there is a content type that's only available from that or only relevant from a certain site downwards, that's fine. We can create it in that site. That site will inherit all the content types from its parent, but we can create another one there and have that also available from that point downwards. When it comes to using content types within your lists and libraries, it's generally the role of a site owner to go in there and create content types, add those to the lists and libraries, because it's the role of the site owners to build the structure. In SharePoint 2007 and 2010, what permission level was granted to what SharePoint refers to as the members group by default? Contribute. Yeah. What about 2013 and SharePoint Online and 2016?
Right.
Sorry? Right. It's called edit. What's the difference between contribute and edit? Any ideas?
Edit compared to column.
Uh,
Design.
Yeah, well, not only that, the edit permission level allows those users to not only add and edit and delete content within the lists and libraries, but create lists and libraries. That sounds dangerous, doesn't it? Because surely the whole point of a site owner is to build the structure of your SharePoint sites for use by the users. Members are your main set of users. Another point that I'll make is the term members, or having a visitors group, a members group, and an owners group for each site is awful. It's a terrible way of managing permissions. SharePoint kind of suggests that's how you should do it. Tip of the day, don't do it like that, because it's just awful. If you want to know more, ask me afterwards. We can't get into that as well as content types, we just don't have time. Permissions is another topic I've spoken at a lot of these types of conferences and events regarding. So I speak all the Australian SharePoint Saturdays, or now they're rebranded in Australia as Office 365 Saturday, but the same kind of thing. I've spoken at one in the UK and stuff as well, so I generally choose something a topic that where SharePoint's, the way SharePoint suggests you do something is not necessarily the best practice, and therefore to take people down hopefully a slightly better path. Permissions is one of those. There is a blog post about it on the 3Grow blog site as well, so feel free to have a look in there. So yeah, the edit permission is what's granted to what we refer to as the members, or SharePoint refers to as members by default. But surely your users should be responsible for managing content, not structure. Lists and libraries, or apps, as they're for some strange reason known from 2013 onwards, they're not content, they're structure. So if a user in a folder structure can't work out where to put something, what do? Create a new folder and put it in there. Yep. Maybe it could go in that folder called sales, it could go in that folder called marketing, they're not sure, so they create a sales and marketing folder. So they're basically going against the structure that we've already kind of defined. So surely the whole role of a site owner is to give them a fixed structure. Yes, the site owner should be from that area of the business. So the owner of the sales site should be somebody from sales. That's how SharePoint is designed to work, of course, not IT. IT shouldn't be managing sites or permissions or content types. That's not their job in any way, shape or form. They shouldn't be managing permissions or anything like that at the site level. It's not what they're for. So business users within that area of the business should be doing that. So therefore, of course, whoever is responsible for creating those lists and libraries and sites and content types should have knowledge of how the information should be structured, and therefore, maybe they have had input from various different users, but they get the structure pretty much spot on, because it's their area of the business. So if the user can't work out where to put something, it's probably their fault that they can't find it, as opposed to the fact it doesn't exist yet. So if a user can't work out where to put something and they have edit permissions, they're going to think, it's all right, I'll just create another library. And I'll call it miscellaneous documents. Oh, that's just you inviting trouble, aren't you? You're just inviting someone to just make an absolute mess of this SharePoint site that you've spent a lot of time meticulously planning. Someone's just going to come and dump a load of folders in there. Oh, what a waste of time. So, what we're therefore able to do is, so site owners are the ones typically responsible for doing that. I'm not saying that the edit permission level shouldn't be used at all, but it shouldn't, in my opinion, be the permission level assigned to your main set of users of the site. Contributors for those people. Maybe a couple of those you give edit to as well, so they can create lists and libraries. How many people, in your organizations, do you provide training to site owners? Anybody? Anybody who is probably a smaller show of hands to ask who does provide training to their site owners than doesn't. Who does provide training for their site owners? Well, sure, you don't, just need to sort that out. But a few of you, and therefore I'm assuming the rest of you don't. Is that a fair assumption? So about 5 people provide training for their site owners. The rest of you probably don't, meaning that the site owners, who are the ones that can break stuff and set it up really badly, have no idea what they're actually doing. Which is very, very common. Don't worry, you're not on your own. The vast majority of organisations are the same. Who provides proper kind of classroom training for their main users? Exactly. And if those main users are the ones given edit permissions, again, you're just asking for trouble. So end users, it's kind of seen that they should be able to just kind of work it out themselves. It's just another Microsoft product, how difficult can it be? Well, that's what content types are for, to stop it being so difficult for them. If they go to a document library and upload a file, let's say it's an expenses claim. They go to upload it, and at the point of uploading, SharePoint will say, is that an invoice, a quote, or a contract? It's not, it's an expenses claim. Ah, I'm in the wrong place. There we go, you're making it as foolproof as possible by using content types. They'll think, okay, sorry, there's the expenses library. It'll probably go in there. So the content types are determining what should go where, and not only that, but again, enforcing the metadata, therefore enforcing that good quality of information. So, in most lists or libraries, out of the box, we will need to consciously go in and allow management of content types within the advanced settings of a list or a library. There's only a couple of out-of-the-box list or library templates that will have that turned on by default. One of them is tasks, not for any real reason other than in 2010, there were 2 content types by default, task and summary task. In 2013, they got rid of summary task, but still didn't turn off the ability to manage content types by default. Others, things like site assets that have video, image, audio, the pages library and a publishing site. Aside from that, the vast majority won't have that option turned on by default. Therefore, as a site owner, we need to consciously go in there. And by selecting yes, allow management of content types, what we are saying as a site owner is, let me decide what content types this list or library uses. Don't just use whatever came with that list or library template. What do you reckon is the most commonly used, so for those of you who have played around with content types, what do you think is the most commonly used content type within libraries? Not in libraries. Document. What do you think should be the least commonly used content type within your libraries? Document. Yeah, because what does the document content type consist of, settings-wise? Name and title. That's it. No document template, no other columns, other than, of course, the column that everything has, like created date, created by, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, as far as user-specified metadata, name and title. Well, that's no good to anyone, is it? What use is that? We can't categorize stuff using name or title. We need a lot more. So what happens when we then add content types to our lists or libraries is it actually gives us a local copy of that content type within that list or that library. So we have what's called the site content type, which is in the content types gallery. We then have what's known as the list content type, which is the copy of it used in that specific list or library. The reason that principle exists, I think there is a slide that will kind of demonstrate that in a moment. But the idea behind that kind of structure is that if I've got, for example, 8 libraries where I need invoices and quotes, I can create those content types and add them to each of those libraries. In one of those 8, I need an extra column for quotes, but not in the other 7. Well, I can just tweak it at that level in that library. I don't need to create a new content type just for that one library and use the other content type in the other 7. I can just make that adjustment at the library level. If I therefore make any changes in the content types gallery, it will still pass those changes to that locally modified version of the quote content type. So any changes, as we said, made that will push down to any items, not only new items created based on those content types, but of course existing items as well. So on this diagram here, what we have here is essentially that's the what we call the list content type. It's a list content type, not a library content type, because as far as SharePoint is concerned, a library is a type of list. It's a type of list that can hold files. So this is the list content type, as are these. This is the site content type. So I can then make adjustments here for the benefit of just that library without impacting all of the others, if it's just a one-off. If you've got more than a couple of lists or libraries that need that same setup, then maybe you want to create a new content type based on invoice and then use that instead. All right, so a content type is making sense so far? Yeah, wonderful. Clear as mud, as they say. Just a quick chat on the content type hub, just to make sure we're happy with what that is all about. So I did mention earlier that in the majority of scenarios, content types are managed at the site collection level, top of the site collection, because that's content types are typically relevant to that particular area of the business. There are some content types that you may want to manage at a lower level, as we said. Maybe it's only the payroll sites where you need a payslip content type, rather than the top-level finance department site. Other content types are relevant to the entire organization, in which case that's what the hub is all about. The content type hub is essentially a site collection dedicated to that one job of managing enterprise content types. Well, it doesn't have to be, but it should be. Some people will use maybe their root site collection, which is maybe their intranet, and that will kind of double up as their hub. But the people responsible for managing the intranet are not necessarily the same people who are responsible for managing enterprise-wide content types. That's why it's recommended to have that as a separate site collection. Could even be in a separate web application altogether. So if this is our intranet web app, we've got the root site collection, a couple of division or department site collections, and then we've got the project site collection over here as well. And what we've then got is another web application altogether, just containing that single root site collection. The only thing to make sure of is if that site collection is going to be the content type hub, it needs to first of all have the publishing infrastructure feature activated at the site collection level, because that's what adds in all of the missing content types that a normal team site wouldn't have. Things like the publishing page content types. Then there's another site collection feature, which is very simply the content type syndication hub. Now, what that then means is any content types I create here, I can publish out to those subscribing site collections. There's 3 main reasons why I may want to publish a content type from the content type hub. What are those reasons?
It's consistent, make it consistent between the departments.
Yeah, that I guess is the case for publishing them in general, but maybe more specifically, what scenarios? In what scenario would I publish a content type from the hub? I'll give you a clue. One of the reasons is to create a new content type that doesn't already exist out of the box. What do you think the other reasons might be? Rather than to create a new content type.
Update or change an existing one?
Exactly, to edit an existing content type. For example, as an organization, we've decided that we're not being very efficient because people are assigning tasks to team members throughout their SharePoint team sites, but they're not putting the assigned to or the due date. Both of those are optional out of the box. What we don't want to have to do is go to every site collection and change the settings of the task content type to make the due date and assigned to columns mandatory. But we don't have to. We can go to the hub, modify that content type in the hub, and then publish it out. What that will then do is overwrite the out-of-the-box task content type in each of those site collections with the updated version of it with those two columns mandatory. Anything that gets published from the hub, so for example, in that scenario, what would happen if I then went to the task content type within the sales site collection? What would I see when I looked at that content type?
Read-only.
By default, it's read-only. Yeah. Doesn't mean we can't stop it being read-only, but as a site owner, that means that I have to consciously go in and stop that content type being read-only in order to then modify it. Make sense? So that would therefore save me accidentally changing it. So there's a couple of content types that I would recommend never ever changing. What do you think they are? Item. Because what would happen if I changed item within a site collection? What will that affect? Everything. Because item is the top, as the parent of all of your list item and document content types. If I modify item, let's say by adding a column, that will add that column to every item in every list and every library in the entire site collection. Not just new items, but also any existing items. So, don't edit item. Another one that I wouldn't ever edit. Document, yeah. So those two content types, I would never modify them. So there's the third reason why you may want to publish a content type from the hub. It's not because we want to change it. It's not because it's new. I just want to make it read-only by default within those subscribing site collections. Yes?
But you're saying don't use document if you can, right?
Of course.
Right. Okay.
We certainly aren't going to be using documents
Right.
if you're using content types properly.
Don't
But
edit document, but don't use document at the same time.
yeah, because even if you edit document, even if you're not using document, editing it will have a massive impact because, of course, of all the content types inheriting from it. So if I edit the document content type, even just looking at out-of-the-box content types, linked document, rich media assets such as image, audio, video, basic page, web part page, wiki page, all of those will be impacted by changing the out-of-the-box document content type because their document is the parent of all of your file content types, whatever that file happens to be. So if I then have my own document content types, they will pick up those changes as well. So that's the third reason, is not to update or publish a new content type, but simply to lock that content type so that a site owner has to consciously go in and stop it being read-only. Yes?
Are the content type changes made by a service account or like the actual, basically could you be a content type hub owner without being any other site collection?
Absolutely, yeah. So I don't need any permissions over any of these site collections as long as I have full control within the hub. If I can publish from the hub, it's because I'm deemed responsible enough to manage enterprise content types, and that is part of my job. Some people often say, oh, that sounds dangerous. It sounds dangerous having someone with those permissions, only if they don't know what they're doing. Permissions themselves are not dangerous. That's like saying, well, it's actually a bad example, but guns are dangerous. Because guns, people can kill people. Yeah, if someone's sensible, they're not. So that's why you don't go to America. Oh, I go further with that. So, permissions are only dangerous if they're given to the wrong people. Make sense? We agree? Yeah, of course we do. If you don't agree, get out. No joke. You can stay. So that's the content type hub. There is a fourth reason that you can publish, or that I would publish from the hub. You can publish content types, which of course, therefore, they'll take their columns with them. But what if I just want to publish a column? Maybe there's a new site column that I want to make available for use throughout the organization. It's not a column that specifically is assigned to any content type at the moment, or certainly not at an organization level. I want to make that column available within those subscribing site collections. I can't publish a column. So how do I make it available? Well, a content type takes its columns with it, but there is no content type that belongs to yet. So what I do is I create a column called a content type based on item, just called something like enterprise columns. Any columns that I want to publish throughout the organization that don't really belong to a content type yet, I add them to that enterprise columns content type and then publish that. That therefore essentially will publish that content type along with its columns to each of those site collections. We just need to make sure the description of that content type clearly says, do not use this content type within your lists or libraries. It is purely there as a vehicle to kind of take enterprise columns to the subscribing site collections. All right, so we've talked about what content types are, why we use them, the process and the principles of creating and managing those, adding them to lists and libraries, and also what we mean by the content type hub. So is everybody happy with all of that before we have a look at a little demonstration? Wonderful, all right. How long have I got, by the way?
10 minutes.
10 minutes? Perfect. Yeah.
Can I ask a quick question?
Of course.
You said before something about a content type gallery. Is that the same as a hub?
The content type gallery is what we refer to the site content types per site.
Okay.
The hub has its own gallery where you manage content types that you then publish to the whole organization. Whereas what we, when I generally refer to the gallery, it's relative to the site.
Got it.
So each site has its own content types gallery. It's under the Web Designer Galleries heading, and it's just called Site Content Types.
Thanks.
No problem. All right, so let me just jump into my demo environment. The site says it's called training. Don't worry about that. It's a sales type scenario. Where the Wi-Fi is going to, oh no, there we go, it's all right, it's working. So, first of all, I have my customers list containing just 4 customers. Now, I've then created some content types so that within the customer documents library, rather than when someone creates a new document, they have to start from a blank Word document, or they have to create it elsewhere and then upload it, I want users to be able to go to the new drop-down of this library and just choose what they want to create. But I also want them to only be able to create what should go into that library. So, also, for those of you who have not seen it, this is the new document library interface that's been introduced into SharePoint Online and probably will be introduced into 2016 before too long. Notice there is no ribbon. Microsoft have removed the ribbon. That ribbon only lasted 2 versions of SharePoint, 2010 and 2013. And then they've gone back to a toolbar, which is essentially what we had in 2007. The main difference being the toolbar is responsive based on what you select. So with nothing selected, I can create, upload, switch to the datasheet view, sync and set alerts. With something selected, it then changes to opening, sharing, getting a link, and all the same options you would expect to find on the ellipses menu as well. Because there is no ribbon, there is therefore nowhere to put library settings. So they've moved it to here. Traditionally, the cog up here was for site level stuff, but they've just dropped the library settings up there as well. So just to quickly explain the new interface. Views, rather than being up here, they've now moved them over here. Also, as well as a list-orientated view, we can switch to a tiles view. So it's like a tiles version of whichever view you apply. So just to quickly point out those differences in case you weren't familiar with that new interface. So let's just jump into the site settings and have a look at what I've done so far with regard to my content types. So I'm in the top level site of this site collection. If I just jump into the content types gallery, this is exactly the same no matter which version of SharePoint you use it. Content types are content types. We're using 2007, 10, 13, online, 2016, doesn't matter. We're using SharePoint Foundation, the free version, standard enterprise, exactly the same. Content types are content types. So what I've done is I've created this content type called sales document, sitting below document. Then below sales document, I've got quote, invoice, and contract. The point of sales document is to provide me a means by which I can push settings down to invoices, quotes, and contracts in one go. They have a lot of shared columns, for example. So when I go into the sales document content type, the columns that are relevant to invoices, quotes, and contracts, I add here. So customer, account manager, date raised, invoices, quotes, and contracts all need those columns. So that's why I add those columns there. Then, of course, the quote content type would inherit all of those columns, and that's all they need. That's all a quote needs in our example. Oh, sorry, and amount. We've added amount. So the quote amount. Contract will inherit those columns, but instead of adding amount, we've added contract number. Invoice, we've added amount and PO number. So each content type has its own set of settings. All happy with those? Yeah, so that's the main thing we're looking at, and that's the main setting of a content type really, is going to be its metadata, its columns. If those columns don't already exist out of the box, what we'd have to do is, of course, create those columns. So if I just jump back into the site settings page, in there we have our site columns gallery. Here we can therefore create any columns that we don't get out of the box. Things like customer, which you'll see is a lookup to the customer's list. Here we've got PO number, we've got amount, account manager. Account manager, we can, that's a personal group, meaning you can also apply an additional level of validation. So rather than allowing users to choose anyone from Active Directory or from your pool of employees, we can filter that to say only allow them to choose someone from the sales department or something like that. So that's the personal group. So there we've got the columns, they get added to the content types, and those kind of get passed down to their child content types. What we then did was created this library called customer documents, which we just saw a few moments ago. Now, if I, by default, what content type would this document library come with? Document, which means that if a user simply went to create a new document, what would it give them?
A name and a title.
Sorry?
Name, title, and a title.
Only name and title. Yeah. What about as a document template?
Word document.
Normally Word. Why is it normally Word? Where is it getting Word from?
In the library.
It's the library. Most people think it comes from the document content type. The document content type doesn't have a document template. When you create a library, it will use Word as the library level template unless you specifically choose otherwise. So you could use Excel or PowerPoint or maybe even a web part or wiki page or something like that. Normally Word, but that's the library level. What they have done in SharePoint Online is they've now, on the ribbon, if you still have a ribbon, you go to create a new document, it is still just whatever the library level default is. However, if we were to go to the new item drop down just here, in the new interface, it's still using the document content type, but allowing you to choose Word, Excel, and so on. So actually all the templates are built in there now. But only on this option here, not on the ribbon if you're in the classic interface. On the classic interface, you have got the ribbon, but you've also got a toolbar as well. That was like the transition between just ribbon and no ribbon, and a toolbar instead. You've got kind of a mini toolbar in between, and on there you do still get all of those options as well. But otherwise you'd only get whatever the library level setting is. So that means that that's why the document template of a content type is very important, because if you don't set a document template, it will use whatever that library level setting is. As soon as I add my own content types, they will appear here instead of the Word, Excel, and PowerPoint and so on, which means that it will then go back to the library level option. Okay, so at the moment, all I can do is choose to create a new contract. The other content types exist, invoice and quote, for example, because you can see them here. There are items, but why is it only allowing me to create a new contract? Any idea? Well, I've removed the library level template, and the content types don't have their own template. So I can't create something new unless there's a template for it to use. So let's start by giving the invoice content type a template. So all I'm going to do is go back into my content types gallery. So to content types, when I set a template, there's two ways of doing it. The first way of doing it is to actually upload a template into the content type, which is fine if that content type is the only one that needs that same template. So I can just go to the advanced settings of the content type, upload a new document template, and then on my desktop, I can just choose this invoice document template. Pretty straightforward. But if I had lots of content types that all needed the same template, I'd have to upload it, let's say, 5 times for 5 different content types. If I then needed to modify that document template, I'd have to either modify it 5 times, or open it once, modify it, save it locally, then upload that into the other 4. Either way, it's a bit of a hassle. So another way I can do it is by storing that template in a library and pointing the content type to that file in that library. Now when I go to create a new document, invoice is there as well, and it will then give me the invoice document template. Now, quite an interesting kind of related to psychology to a degree, but what people did in a Windows environment or a folder structure is they would open up a form, or whether it's an expenses claim or an invoice or whatever, they fill in the information. So let's say it's an expenses claim. They put their name, their department, their manager, the month and the year that the claim is for. They add all their receipts, which gives them a total at the bottom. Yeah. When they then go to save that, they go to their department folder, to their name folder, to the year folder, to the month folder, and they save it there. So obviously, browsing through a folder structure, if you're using content types, is replaced with filling in metadata. That make sense? So users were more than happy to fill that information into a form, then use the same information to consciously go through that folder structure. But because one of them is filling in information, the other is browsing through a folder structure, they're seen as different. And the user has no problem doing both of those things, because that's just how it works. But as soon as they then fill this information into the Word document, when they then save it, they're going to need to populate the metadata. What they're populating as metadata is the same as what they've just put in here, which all of a sudden they don't want to do. Now they think they're wasting time by doing it twice. They were already doing it twice, just in a slightly different way. Rather than filling in the document, then following a folder path, they're doing the same thing by filling in the document, then filling in the metadata. It's the same thing, really, isn't it? Yeah. But all of a sudden now they don't like it. Now they think they're wasting time. So what would be ideal, of course, is rather than having to put the information in here and then fill in the metadata, what would be better than that? Yeah, or vice versa. Or put information into the document which doubles up as metadata, or vice versa. Yeah, exactly. So, we're going to get to that in just a moment. But that's just showing that when we create a document, we can choose the content type. If I choose to upload a document, I can choose the relevant content type here. So when I upload, it comes through as the default content type. In the old interface, it will ask me what the content type is. Here, in the new experience, it'll default to the default content type, and I then change it if that's not what it is, just by going to its properties. Where's its properties gone? Nice, what you can do here in the new interface as well is this task pane down the right. So I can change its content type, which will then change which columns it's going to ask me to populate, which is pretty nice. So here I can input all that information, who the customer is, who the account manager is, and so on. And of course, PO number is there. If I changed it to quote, PO number wouldn't be there. So I can upload and I can specify the content type and therefore populate the metadata. When we create new, same thing, but with the addition of a document template. I did say there's two ways of setting a template. So what I'm going to do is just go back to the site homepage. It doesn't show my recent libraries when I'm in the new experience. It does in the classic experience, in the quick launch. So I have got some document templates in there. Now, is anybody familiar with quick parts? One of you. Okay. So if I just jump into my document templates library has dropped off the recent list. So let's just open up document templates. So what I have in here, another way of course, providing a document template is I could have uploaded that invoice document in here. Let's do the same with quote. Let's just grab that quote document template from the desktop, drop it in here. Now it's a bit of a pain to get the right URL in SharePoint Online because it keeps trying to use the document ID URL if you've got document IDs turned on, which is a bit of a pain because the document ID URL doesn't have a file extension, therefore it doesn't know what to display on the new item drop down as a little icon. So it's a bit frustrating, but what we'll do is just take the URL of the library, and then when I go to my content type, I can just manually put the file name on the end of that because I want it to have the actual file, the fixed absolute URL. So if I go to my quote content type, and in here, rather than uploading a template into it, I'm going to point it to that file in that document templates library. And of course, make sure that not many people have edit permissions to that library. So I can just paste that URL in here, templates/quote.docx. Now that that has a template, if I go back to my customer documents library, and choose to create a new document, quote is now there. But that still doesn't solve the other problem that I've got to actually put the information into the document and then also populate it into the metadata as well. So what we can do, I'll demonstrate this within this document here. Bear in mind, I'm playing the role of a site owner. Am I over time, by the way? Nobody was hungry anyway, don't worry about it. So you'll see these quick parts already in there, which is actually because I'd already done them into the local templates. It's a bad example. But what we'll be able to do is just insert quick parts and, am I even in the edit mode? Okay, it's not allowing me to choose the quick parts. Either way, we can just go to insert quick parts, there we go, document property, and we've then got the relevant metadata here. But in order to allow us to drop the metadata into the template, it needs to be based on the content type. This is a bit that sometimes kind of confuses people a bit. So if I just jump into that templates library again, if we want to pre-insert those quick parts, the quick parts only exist to be put into a document if that document is based on the content type. Because the quick parts represent the columns. The columns come from the content type. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So, therefore, if we just go into our document templates library, what you'll see in here is with the contract document template, if I just choose to edit its properties, this is an old experience, as you can see. If I choose to edit its properties, you'll see it is based on the contract content type. If I had 20 document templates that needed quick parts in them, I'd need to add all 20 content types to this library and have that document is based on that content type, that one on that one, with one-on-one relationships. That's okay, because no one's going to go there. Site owners are the only ones that will be playing around with that anyway. The fact that these columns exist means that they're able to be added into the document template itself. Meaning that when a user then goes to that customer documents library, and of course the metadata, the beauty of this is views and sorting and filtering and all that kind of great stuff. So here we've got some views I've already created. By account manager, groups by account manager. By customer, groups by customer. My recent documents, filters to show just the ones where the person looking at the page is the account manager and were raised in the last 7 days. So it's applying 2 filters. When I choose to create a contract, it'll open up that document, and there are some slight issues with the connection between Office and SharePoint on my machine at the moment, but we'll certainly get the general idea, is whenever I enter into the actual document, into those form fields, such as if I just choose a date raised as the current date, customer, you'll see that should be populating a drop-down. If we go to File, here we've got the properties, and if I just go to it's not even showing the customer property, that's strange. All right, well, that's even, yeah. We should be able to drop that in here. Either way, I'll just put the date, that'll do for now. Close it and save it. And let's just call it contract 543. It'll then use the date I've typed into the document to populate the metadata. If I edit the metadata, reopen the document, it will be there in the document as well. So we're no longer doubling up on those actions. So back to the all documents view. I appreciate I have run out of time, probably a while ago. I did say it was a 1-hour session. It has taken an hour, I think. So there we go, that's content types. Exactly the same thing for lists, just without the document templates. Everything else that we've looked at there is appropriate. Other things, as I said, you can set at the content type level, things like workflows, retention policies, and things like that as well. All right, thanks for your time, enjoy the rest of the day.